Well, hello everyone. I'll do the happy Thursday bit. Nikki is out traveling today, customer site, so he couldn't make the time slot. So, it's just me running the show with our special guest, David Zendzian. So, we have another security series update, or now we're gonna go with the name suggested by our friend of the pod, Jake from Awkward Security, into the DMZ on this series. So you'll see that playlist get updated after the show. But yeah, we wanted to kind of bring our friend DMZ on to kind of give us a recap and a little bit of kind of talk about, obviously this big incident around CrowdStrike that happened maybe a few weeks ago, when we actually had a pretty lively chat in, I think, episode 20's chat. It was the chat was somewhat unrelated to the episode, but we thought it would make a pretty interesting episode. These type of things obviously probably keep everybody up at night about what could potentially go wrong at a large scale type of thing. But we wanted to kind of break it down, see how this would have potentially within the Cloud Foundry ecosystem could be remediated or avoided to some degree, that type of thing. I haven't heard of anything be impacted in this space, but I thought it would just be it's definitely a big scenario, probably one of the largest, IT outages in history across the globe. So it's definitely something to talk about, and definitely within the realm of the security space, based on, where
Although,
it originated from.
although
So
realistically, it's in the security space because it was a security tool.
yes,
But there's
but
no
not
reason this couldn't have been a management tool or a backup
mhm,
tool or anything else.
just
So
some bad patch across really anything, right?
yes. And there were a lot of lessons learned actually, and I think
Mhm.
it's as I've been working on writing up a separate response, which hopefully we'll publish next week. It really is. It was there's a confluence of bad timing across the board. And for those who are familiar with antivirus, this was no different than just an antivirus update. And so,
Mhm.
from the point of CrowdStrike, they had done probably a half a dozen of these since they released the product. So it was actually running live, and they were doing updates, and the things had gone fine. But no one expected to have this. In fact, if you think about it, a lot of companies, Tanzu, we do the same thing. We release and do a lot of testing in Cloud Foundry. Think of the number of tests that go into a release of Cloud Foundry. There's a lot of tests, and those tests are 10 plus years old.
Mhm.
Every time something didn't work or something broke in production, like, oh, let's make a new test. I mean, that's the key really of like a test-driven development, right? The idea that as you find problems, you make tests to make sure that those problems don't come back. So I'm willing to bet from the lessons learned. In fact, I have my notes in front of me here on the lessons learned, which is as I read through it, it's like reading a checklist of a Cloud Foundry install. It's like,
Mhm.
let's do blue green deployments. Let's do error based canary based deploys, where if a deploy fails, it stops the deployment.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like Cloud Foundry to me, but
Right, right.
that's
So
my
did
own.
they actually post like an official lessons learned
Yeah,
slash
yeah. Actually,
response?
I've got a link right here. I'll share with everybody.
Okay.
It is, and there's a good couple of links, and I think that's probably one of the better ones. It gets into a lot of the lessons learned, remediation, how they actually fix the problem, and there's links into there on some of the more in depth things you can do, and it really, I hate to say CrowdStrike is just bad that they are so successful, and
Mhm.
they got hurt by their own success. I think there was either Fortune 500. What was it? They are in, gosh, I think it's like 298 of the Fortune 500. So you can imagine that their own success hurt them here, in that when things went bad, it caused a significant problem. Now, there's a good thing to note that this was only on the Windows side, because generally Linux tends to not have kernel. It does have kernel failures, and it has kernel crashes, but generally those would cause a core dump and cause a process to fail. It rarely causes an entire Linux system to fail. So I
Right.
guess the big question is, what would have happened in Cloud Foundry for Windows? And I will say that maybe, Nick, we can have CrowdStrike come join us in a future episode, because they are a partner of Tanzu, and they are working on a tile for Cloud Foundry. So we're gonna have a
Okay.
Taz tile for Cloud, for CrowdStrike sometime in the next few months. I'm sure it's gonna be delayed because of everything going on in their world right now. So
Right, right.
it was supposed to come out this month. but I guess we'll have to wait a few more weeks and see where they are with things. But maybe we can invite them to come kind of talk about their product. But if you think about the way add-ons work in Cloud Foundry, that's really what this would have been. This would have been an add-on to, it would have been a CrowdStrike tile that would have, when you're building and you're actually doing your repaving of the environment, you're actually building out the servers. If you think about it, it takes a stem cell, it builds out a VM, and then it brings up that add-on server and starts attaching and bringing those add-ons on. Right. And what really happened here is CrowdStrike released something, and I don't have the times available handy, but it was only like an hour. It started at 4:09 UTC, and by 5:30, so about less than an hour and a half later, they had fixed the problem, had a new version. So the downside is if you're running antivirus in your machine, if there's new antivirus definition, everything just grabs it and installs it. Right. And that's actually one of their lessons learned is we need to have a way of having those segregated. So if you think about this would be in Cloud Foundry, like in a Kubernetes world, where say we have an agent running for a management cluster. And the way a lot of enterprises deal with things is they'll have a registry download and validate that agent and then stage it out to their production stuff. So in the Kubernetes world, there's kind of a mechanism where you can actually prevent automatic installs. If you're a large enterprise, you're generally doing that sort of stuff. But on the antivirus and things that are running on desktops, and this is where it really hurt CrowdStrike, is they're on every desktop. They're a tool for desktops, workstations, and servers. The servers is where it caused a big problem, but every Windows desktop out there that had CrowdStrike had the same problem. Yeah.
So I've heard incidents where all the workstations potentially at a company got impacted. Then they had things like their domain controllers get impacted, and potentially the servers holding all the BitLocker keys also get impacted. So it's like this cascading, oh no, type situation. So,
and the hard thing is to fix it. If you look at the link that I shared, it shows it goes into remediation. You have to remove a file in the file system. But what do you do with that POS system sitting inside of a small retail location that's 1,000 miles from anything? And you have to, it's a blue screen of death, and you have to actually go in and remove a file. How do you do that? And that's kind of the trouble that came in is you saw the screens of all those airline terminals, all of them are blue screen of death. Well, someone had to go in there and fix that.
Yeah, manually fix it. And if they're BitLocker, then you have people trying to key in this however long key to just get it to that state. So I saw a lot of pictures on the internet of. I was like, whew. Those texts getting dispatched to all these sites. They've got to.
I'm so glad. I used to be like probably you were at one time, Nick. You had the phone. You're on call.
Yep.
2 a.m, things break. You're there until dawn. That's your job. And I was talking to a friend. He's like, we only have 7,000 systems left to patch, and it's just it's like my heart goes out to those teams. Those people, they need a good vacation. Hopefully, all the enterprises who are watching the show, it wasn't their fault, but they stepped up and they solved these companies. The companies went through billions of outages, and I think we were talking earlier about the lawsuits that are coming from this, and we'll see where the world ends up on this. But going back to Cloud Foundry, let's go through this. What would have happened if we had a CrowdStrike tile? If we were actually running, we had customers running large scale. Let's say they were 10,000 VMs and they're running Cloud Foundry or Windows and had CrowdStrike. Well, what would have happened? Well, yes, it would have crashed if it done the update. First and foremost, if the plugin. So this is an interesting question. So add-ons on Cloud Foundry don't necessarily download live updates. They might not. That's actually a question that we're going to have when we actually go back and revisit with Cloud Foundry with CrowdStrike on what they're working on for the tile. Is does it do live updates, or do you have to reapply changes for the updates? So depending on that, it would have either crashed or not. Now, if it did crash and the patch was available and it did auto updates, well, our solution is we don't have to log into a bunch of machines. You have to do a reboot and put them in safe mode and log in. Cloud Foundry, we just hit apply changes. It just repaves the environment. You don't have to worry about going and logging into machines. You just build a new machine, download a new version, and you're ready to go. So from a Cloud Foundry point of view, we would have just had to apply changes and wait for it to repave the environment, and then you would have been fixed. So all of those things they talked about, this canary-based deployments, the blue-green deployments, all the all those things that they're talking about in their lessons learned from the link I shared, that's part of the way Cloud Foundry does these deployments. So if there was a CrowdStrike issue in the Cloud Foundry world, I believe that if we come back after the agent was fixed, an hour and a half later, then all of a sudden you would have started seeing Cloud Foundry Windows systems just come up with the new stuff, and it wouldn't have been a massive outage. It would have been maybe an hour and a half for a Cloud Foundry customer.
Yeah, you do those rolling deployments and then start seeing the systems become remediated as they get freshly built, that type of thing. Obviously now, like that type of automation doesn't exist in the end user desktop space for sure, but definitely a benefit of when you're running these cloud platforms that you have this automation to rebuild from a golden state. And I think that kind of speaks to, we see some of our our customers just doing this like hygienic repaving, on a periodic basis, just from an overall security stance. So like some of them would have been, might have just been hit their next repave already and already been scheduled, perhaps. But who knows?
A bunch of customers do that, and actually that's I wish I could name the few of them, but there are a few that we have some Old Spring One talks that if you go out and search the Old Spring One talks, you'll find a few of those customers who do it. They were doing it like every 7 to 10 days, but there are a few that I know of that every 3 days they're repaving their environment, which that's pretty aggressive. But there are customers. You think about the scale of where Cloud Foundry runs. It is the largest enterprises in the world, as well as the largest Department of Defense, military, intelligence agencies. It's everywhere. So it is one of those things that is under attack and is highly scalable, and the automation and the hands off. In fact, you're thinking about the error handling, the monitoring of it. I was talking to a customer just last week. It was a bank in the Asia region, and they were concerned because the security team wasn't used to Cloud Foundry. They're like, oh, we need to do like hardening of the systems. We keep logging in and changing things, and it keeps changing back. And it's like, well, let's back up. Wait a second. And the thing called ephemeral systems it's meant to be from there. So there's a big misunderstanding, because a lot of, from a security person's point of view, we've always wanted to have the ability to have large deployments with pre-built guardrails and controls around it. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Cloud Foundry. I do spend a big chunk of my time teaching security teams about all these features and how do we actually build. The hardening that went into Cloud Foundry actually went all the way down to the stem cells and the ability to do build packs, and actually went into the open source project. That it's if it needs to be hardened more, let's talk about it. Let's make it better. But when you do it in one place, all of a sudden thousands of organizations can inherit that change to the operating system into the system that runs it. So it's to me, as a security person, one of the best ways of automating large scale application environments. Kubernetes, cool. I have no problem with it, but there's a certain scale to the infrastructure itself having those controls, not just the pods running applications. But I don't know if Nick, have you had a chance to do a 3,000 Kubernetes node upgrade, and how did that go?
I think that scenario, talking from past experience and current friends from my previous career, the advice is just build a new cluster, migrate your workload. At that point, there is no concept of that large scale in place upgrade, unfortunately, in the Kubernetes realm, at least from what I'm hearing.
But in a way, isn't that what a repaving is doing? So natively, we are constantly rebuilding it, but why build a new cluster when it's part of the existing environment?
Exactly. So that's this, I think, this underlying power of Bosch really behind the scenes, because this technically would probably apply to almost any Bosch deployed machine, right, or managed infrastructure. So our data tiles that are deployed like that could get a similar benefit of that repaving process as well. Now, you might not want to repave your databases that frequently, that type of thing, because they are running a little bit more heavier type of workload than some of these container scheduler type of stuff. But it's totally plausible there as well. And I would assume those customers that have that frequent repave are probably doing something similar as well. So
data is a really interesting conversation. I think that might be a whole podcast all in itself, because data is one of those few things that has such a minimal latency requirement. How do you upgrade a database when everything depends upon it? And if you start thinking about the AI world, and we start looking at petabytes of data, and what happens when you upgrade a database and it changes part of the table structure, and then you're like 3 hours waiting for that table structure to update, and what happens if it has an error?
And then you have to make code changes to fix any potential error on the app side if it didn't parse those new table structures right, or something like that too. So Yeah, that's an interesting. That you could deep dive on that for quite some time, I believe.
So, gosh, we could probably. I'm surprised how many no, especially how many questions or comments on Crowdstrike. Yeah,
yeah. If anyone out there, we have some live listeners. If you want to deep dive in the questions, please let us know. We'll happy to take some questions here.
And I will have a blog post at some point getting into this. It's mostly written, but Nick, you and your peers are making my way of speaking into better ways of receiving it. I'll be honest.
Yeah, we got a lot of good people for that. So yeah, and I appreciate all of my team helping.
I do too. I one of my struggles. I'm great at dumping data out and having mass amounts of data, but turning it into something that's actually relatable and readable is. I love. Whenever I worked on a book, editors were my best friend. I am not tied or bound to the way I say and word things. I love the fact that people can word and write things in a much clearer form of English than most security people speak.
And then just going back on that data piece, I think too. Well, as this is somewhat unrelated topic, but it brings me up to the the concept of. We have the MySQL tile and some of these other services where we're talking about upgrading those major versions, like going from like MySQL 5.7 to MySQL 8 or something like that type of upgrade. That Bosch orchestration, within Cloud Foundry does even allow is now exposed from what I remember and reading. And actually, I tested this. I had demos of this a bit ago. But you could say. You could provision a database and it's like a MySQL 5.7, but then that you can either do like a mass, like platform level, like I want to mass upgrade all my service instances to be from 5.7 to 8.0. And I think those are the version numbers. That makes sense. From the platform side, or you could delegate that to the developers and say, hey, do some Canary deployments, or maybe upgrade your non-prod database to the MySQL 8.0, test those new any kind of the new table structures or anything like that, and then then you roll that up throughout your higher level environments too. So I think that's another I guess benefit too within this going back to blue green or Canary, just general business practices of test it, and
if it fails, don't keep rolling it out.
Yes.
Don't bring everything else behind it if one fails. That's I think that's one of the biggest. And it's when I first read that in the CrowdStrike post incident reviews, I was like, don't allow enterprises to control what they install. Which there are humongous amounts of automation you can do around Cloud Foundry. There's a platform automation to automate these things, but even the largest firms have automation. Have a form of governance. They'll test it, and they won't just automatically roll it out in production. We understand enterprises have a process. You want to make sure things don't break, and then that Canary itself. There's so much to be said about a failing safe. Making sure that if things go bad, and going back to the data side of it, that's actually been one of the hardest things in the security space, because there are security updates to data systems. But data systems are so hard to upgrade. Even if you do this developer process you talked about, when you have a terabyte or a petabyte or an exabyte of data, it is not an easy situation to say let's upgrade that system once a month. In fact, most enterprises have actual exceptions saying we're not going to upgrade the database. We'll build a wall around it and make sure it's contained. And that's also another idea of the Cloud Foundry. The idea is you build it like an appliance. You build a segregated environment. It's not supposed to be on the public network. It's not supposed to be, a lot of customers do deploy it where it's actually accessible. But realistically, all you need to make accessible is the ingress. You don't need to have the data services accessible. All that really should be in its own private networks, totally self-contained, like an appliance. So realistically, it does provide that layer of control, because those data systems may not be upgraded as much as myself or other security teams might require, and there will be times and exceptions where you're going to say we can't do this upgrade. There's just too much impact on the business. And as we can see, these airlines, what would happen if we had to say we're going to take Delta's database off for 10 hours to do an upgrade? I don't see that happening.
Right. Yeah, and it I guess too some of that the the recovery time differences, and I guess the airlines are getting like specifically called out because like it was like pretty much all of them except for maybe I don't know. There's a tweet going around that's like this didn't impact Southwest because they're running a Windows 3.1 or something ridiculous. But
that was my favorite. That was my favorite one. That's truly my favorite one.
Yeah, but I think that on many other podcasts I've listened to, they have disproven that as like that just being kind of like just not accurate.
But it's possible they weren't running Windows systems as part of their critical infrastructure.
Right,
Which,
right.
if you look at Cloud Foundry, we have a humongous Linux deployment too. So there's
exactly.
There's a huge need for Windows systems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a deep level container programmer that gets to the kernel level. I grasp it, I understand it, but I would love to get to a point one day where you don't need a Windows server to run a Windows container. If we really had real containers, it shouldn't matter where you run it. And at that point, then these sort of issues become moot because then you just take your container, put it over here, and turn it on. And it shouldn't matter about the underlying pieces where those things broke. But we're a ways off from any of that happening. I don't see that anytime soon.
Yeah, that would be I think the dream for many people to get that decoupled for sure. Let's see here. So I guess I wanted to ask, and you may or may not notice, did they specify if people could like opt out of these automatic updates?
No, that's actually one of their lessons learned is they want to make it so that end users, like when I talked about the registry side, the idea that an enterprise can control the receiving of those updates, that is one of their lessons learned. So
so they were just default like boom, out to everyone. Go.
It's like any virus. When a new definition comes out, just grab it because it's a security thing. You want to grab that definition because it's these were signatures. So the way CrowdStrike works is it's similar to antivirus, but what it does is it looks for the ways processes are doing things. So if a process is trying to access your shadow file system or whatever there might be a security thing that's an indicator that something is not right, it's not running like it should be, or it's malicious of some kind. It's actually looking at the way things are happening in the way it runs. CrowdStrike is a great tool. It's from a security point of view, CrowdStrike is kind of like where I was still am in many ways a huge fan of some other products that have similar things. But CrowdStrike, it does really great things for that runtime. And you don't want to have if they have an update, it means there's an exploit in the wild. People are using things and they've discovered it, they identified it, they mapped it. And then this is an update to make sure you don't get that malicious attack on your system. So you do want to receive it. I think no one expected that update would cause a kernel error. And it did.
Yeah, so that's kind of like this, I guess, double-edged sword, so to speak, where, like, you want to try to get it out there as soon as possible to potentially,
and they did do tests.
Remediate
they have a set of release tests. I don't know of any company that doesn't have functional tests to make sure it functionally works. So they had it running on Windows systems. I'm sure they did tests, but I don't know enough technically of there might be like a certain type of kernel situation that has to be present for that bug to come. Either way, I'm expecting that their release tests will be updated with these new scenarios.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes.
Now, I guess the better question is: has there been a push since this has happened? I would maybe imagine so.
Well, they had the update where it fixed it. I don't know if there's been additionals since then. I don't know. That's a good question. If anyone out there is listening has that answer, let me know. I've not paid attention because again, I don't use CrowdStrike. We in Broadcom we don't use CrowdStrike, so I don't have that. But I could I'll reach out to a friend or two. If anyone is wondering, I'll find out separately and let people know either in my blog post or we can put a note in the show notes. If I was CrowdStrike, I would be very hesitant to have releases without some mechanism where enterprises can then control it. If we don't have some sort of lessons learned. In fact, one of the lessons learned they had was enhanced error handling. And if you think about it, if you had proper error handling, then it may not turn into a kernel error. You actually have an error that's caught in the code and doesn't default down to a kernel level chain. We had no way of handling this error. It's a kernel error. So it's possible that if they get that in place, that might help in future situations. But I don't. My guts tell me, which I can be completely wrong. Our gut. Never trust your gut in security. Trust but verify.
Exactly.
But in the end, I know they had the update that fixed it, but I don't think they would have had an update since then until the community of their customers is comfortable receiving that update again. So I think everyone's kind of gun shy right now.
Yeah.
That's just my personal feeling on this, but we'll have to wait and see if anyone else out there knows, or if anyone who's listening is actually able to Google. I don't want to Google while we're talking because I don't want to mess up what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm trying to skim through this this document here, but yeah, I can only multitask so little, I guess. But yeah, so I guess too, and I another thing too I wanted to pick your brain on, and this is maybe not not necessarily related, but I also heard a lot of things about, well, because the antitrust with Microsoft back in the day, where I think it was around the Vista timeframe, where they tried to move some of these tools out of the kernel into like an API, and then they're like brought up like an antitrust, competitive, because like Windows Defender got brought in around the same time, and people were saying, well, if Microsoft was allowed to create this API, then this type of update wouldn't bricked all these systems type of thing. So do you know any? It's totally, you could totally say no, but I don't know if you have any thoughts or any kind of insight around that concept, or if that's even like a valid
I don't think there's any trust here. We could bring up the fact that Google, I think, wasn't it Google that just got the
the Google search is I guess monopoly or something.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun dealing with for the next few years or whatever.
So good. Anyway, good luck to anyone to deal with that world. But on the Microsoft or CrowdStrike, CrowdStrike really isn't. I mean, there's competitors to CrowdStrike. In the Windows Defender. So this space, while Microsoft, there was the concern that they were going to build tools. It's like you can't build a tool and force everyone else out of the market. So I think that conversation that you were talking about in the past allowed tools like the Carbon Blacks and the CrowdStrikes and those other tools to build a market where there are massive amounts of, not massive, very massive companies competing against each other, but there is not a single entity that is the single leader in that space. I've worked with customers that are using Microsoft Defender because they feel that provides the tools and protection they need. I have a lot of customers who've been asking when are we going to have a Carbon Black tile for Cloud Foundry, and there was possibility before all the Broadcom stuff, but I think nowadays I don't think that's going to happen. But we'll see. I'm optimistic still. I'm not going to say no. So if you are a Carbon Black and CrowdStrike, a Carbon Black and Cloud Foundry customer, please ping me. The more customers we have, I'll bring that back to the scene. We'll see where it goes. But just like anything else, we have the Aquas, we have the Palo Altos, we have other partners. CrowdStrike is not the only competitor in the market. There is a large market with a lot of similar tools. And in fact, this week is DEF CON and Black Hat, which I wish I was at, but I got a cold this week, and I'm happy to be sitting at my home and watching that hurricane pass.
Yeah.
But if you go down to I'll ping a friend. I'll get you some screenshots of the vendor floors for Black Hat, and there's hundreds of vendors providing security tools. In fact, I'm willing to bet that there's going to be a lot of marketing saying, CrowdStrike customers, come look at our tools. We can help you in the future. I'm willing to bet there's a lot of security companies that are going to lean into this failure to show why their product is the better solution. So I don't think there's any antitrust here. I think that there's the problem is so complex. We have VM level, we have the actual containers, we have the stacks that go into, we have the building components, the build packs, or whatever you're using for building things. There's so many layers to this problem, and no one single vendor can provide an answer to all of it. It's so detailed and complex. In fact, it's one of those things that I get to a customer conversation. We're talking about security. It's so complex that even an hour conversation can't answer all the dozen or so layers you got to talk about. And there's vendors at each layer, and even the tools we're bringing to market to help with these. Where is the problem at? Who's responsible? Is it a platform engineer that upgrades a build pack, or is it a developer that restages that build pack? The biggest problem, in fact, we deal with this every day. We have dozen products with hundreds of components we're releasing on a rapid basis. If anyone goes and looks at the weekly Tanzu updates, which I think the new one's going to come out hopefully on Monday, we have a lot of updates in our organization. Now, I think of any company, if you are Delta, you probably have 2,000 apps out there. You have your booking stuff, you have your freight stuff, you have all these different apps and all the components that make them up, and they're releasing them on a rapid basis. Now, when there's a vulnerability, I admit I'm at fault for this. You grab a tool like Qualys or Nessus or any of the Palo Altos, any tools that they're scanning all these layers, and you say, okay, now we've got 6,000 CVEs. Well, what does that mean to me?
Right.
You have some vendors out there saying, oh no, you use my image, you'll have 0 CVEs. So nothing has 0 CVEs. You're just kind of saying things that aren't going to be fixed, we're not going to talk about, which I understand that, but there are chained attacks. You can use low and medium CVEs to chain your way into a real attack. And it gets really complex. And this is where penetration testing and the actual security teams say, what's the interesting of vulnerability scan and a pen test? How do we look at the layers and the complexity of this? And it's the best thing we can do is to help provide answers to the people who are responsible for all the different layers, saying, platform engineer, here, work on this part right here, and this will up the game for your world. Developer, here, do this piece here. We can help you bump versions and auto upgrade your applications. From the security team, who's responsible for these different pieces? It's helping understand the scope of who's responsible just to up that game. And then also understanding from your vendors, what is that risk? And things like, Palo Alto and CrowdStrike, they can show vulnerabilities, but they really can't tell you what you're at risk for because they don't know the infrastructure. They don't know the pieces in the business. And this is actually a common conversation where many large enterprises don't use the CVEs that come out. They actually do their own risk rating. They actually look at the CVEs and do the effort to looking at it and saying, oh, these are the risks to that. And I think going back to CrowdStrike, there wasn't a tool in place to help mitigate. If they miss something, it'll capture real-time malicious intent. Doesn't mean they're going to get rid of CrowdStrike. It just means they're going to put some guardrails around it to make sure it doesn't cause this problem again. But that risk is still there. This is I've had people bring up saying, hey, we can't talk about the risks in our platform because then bad actors will use those risks. And it's like, well, you don't think that the nation state bad actors have access to all this code? You don't think when you have a 10,000 person team, in the middle of some foreign national country that's hired just to attack the capitalist market out there running these platforms doesn't have the knowledge of these vulnerabilities? So we have to have tools like CrowdStrike and even on the containerized space. You get into containers, you have our partner in Aqua, our partner in Palo Alto, tools for protecting that runtime environment. It's one thing to address the vulnerability, but it's another to actually look for malicious attacks. And CrowdStrike is not going to go away. Right. I feel for their pain. They're going to go through a lot of market stuff right now, and they lost they had that deal that they were being acquired. That's kind of gone away, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to pile on, so to speak. It's just more about how can we I guess learn from this and kind of review some of this stuff because it was such a big it's been such a big topic recently. So yeah, I guess a big hug ops to everybody at CrowdStrike and everybody who was impacted by this, because this was just no fun, regardless of whether you're working at Microsoft, CrowdStrike, or at Delta or whoever else. There's people all over the globe impacted here, and props to all those technicians going out there and reviving all these dead PCs for sure. So definitely don't want to come across as we're pile on per se. But yeah, I think it's definitely
yeah. I think Nick, you and I have both been in ops before, and we recognize it's not to say it's thankless, but there are times when you're like 3 a.m. going, I've got to get this working for the people coming in at 8 a.m. Yeah, so we recognize that there's a mindset that goes to solving the business problems above and beyond, and props to all of y'all. You saved these companies. Yes, they were hurt, hugely hurt, but all those techs, they are this. It was not their job. In fact, one of the memes we're looking at right now is it's that bus crossing with the train. Sysadmin's looking forward to a great long weekend and the CrowdStrike update. It always seems to happen on a Friday, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember too. Some of those windows are like, we got 10 minutes left. We got to do the go no go here. If we're plugging the system back on or trying to fail back or that type of thing too. So yeah, definitely. Whew, yeah.
Well, it was the same for Log4j. When we had that come out, there, it was both in platforms but also in applications. How do you, there? In fact, Log4j is still out there. There are systems that still have not been patched for it.
Yeah.
So good luck to all those people who are fighting that fight.
Yeah, I on a side note, I kind of wonder if we'll come across some of these blue screen of death PCs that have been missed like, you sent the text out to, like, they got all the critical systems up and maybe the store, the distributed site, so to speak. But then they forgot something in the back office, and then no one's just dealt with it. It's just been sitting powered on for months or years type of thing. And somebody finally goes and, like, fixes it or just reimages it or whatever. But
and think about the asset inventory. There are so many millions of systems out there, millions of systems. And there's always that one, when I left one of the banks I worked at years ago, there was a chat server I left, and I heard 7 years later it was still there. So there are back rooms across the world where things are just running, and who's going to fix them? It's going to take, I guess you find out in those situations what systems are really critical for your business and what aren't, and I guess the ones that maybe aren't might only be critical once a month when it runs a report.
Right.
So you find out when you're trying to get that quarterly report out the door, and you're like, where's the report? It's not come. Well, what server is it running? Well, where is that server?
Yeah.
I have an IP address, but I don't even know what continent it's in.
Yeah. It's been down for a long time, though. That's all we know. Or you'll have people who just change their behavior, like, oh, the computers in the back room are dead, so we just moved up to the front room, and like, we don't even go back there anymore, type of thing. Like, we put a ticket in and no one came to fix it. So yeah,
it is a great opportunity to talk about disaster recovery. In fact, I had an interesting conversation from another customer on DR. Because we're living with a new world of our world as we went through all our own acquisition stuff. And one question that came in is, well, like a Crowdstrike, imagine the world goes down, and what happens if our download server that we actually go and download our bits from, what happens if it's down? What's our DR policy? And imagine a world where there's a big, huge bug, and say it's a Log4j again, and we've got to do an update, and all of a sudden the Broadcom download server goes down. Well, there's a DR policy. We can actually still upload images and customers can still download them. There's a whole DR. And these are sort of things you think about. What are those critical systems? Where do they live? And this was a good chance. Hopefully, every company out there uses a good lessons learned on what are their critical systems and what is their DR and recovery process. And we talked earlier about the fact that for Cloud Foundry, we just do reapply, just repave the environment, and that's our DR process. Mm-hmm. But what is your DR process? If it's VMs, maybe you need something like Salt. Maybe you need to have an automation tool. A lot of companies are still using your Chef and Puppets, but we have our own ways with Salt. What is your process for DR? How do you recover from these? And security is one piece of that DR puzzle, but how do you handle those most critical systems highly available? So DR becomes a failover event, and this comes down to the whole CrowdStrike. If you have the ability to have like a big A application point of view of your environment, and you have multiple clusters for that application, well, let's do an update on a part of a cluster over here. So if it goes down, the app doesn't go down. So the ability to control those updates, stage the environment, understanding what your big A application view of the environment is, and then being able to say as a business, okay, let's do an upgrade where we can actually bring down half our infrastructure. The idea of like the old, again, Spring One demo where someone's just sitting there shopping at online retailer and say, hey, everybody in the audience, let's go shopping. Hey, we just turned a data center off. That should have been CrowdStrike. It really should have been, we do an upgrade over here, it causes a failure, we're not going to touch over here. But that's one of those lessons learned. They need to have the ability to stage those updates, and they're going to have that. If they don't have it yet, they're going to have it real soon.
Right. It's definitely a good reminder, though, for everyone listening. Make sure your backup, your DR plans are updated. Test them if you can. Just because things like this type of, and you may have already tested them recently, but
testing. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, testing and/or implementing that type of thing. That's
I don't know testing of DR plans. So Nick, you've been in operations before. Generally, that's a quote tabletop exercise.
Oh yes, yes,
So in reality, when everything hits the fan.
Yeah.
Is it really ready? And so I'm a big fan of actually doing real DR testing. And I don't know, just even not just DR, but even incident response. How do you deal with something bad that happens when all you've done is once a year, everyone joins for a half an hour meeting and everyone says, okay, I heard it, and we move on. These sort of things, when you're working in an incident, when you're working with things are down, people are, like you're on that conference call with 400 people, and only 4 of them are actually doing the work.
Oh man, you must have been in my life for the past 14 years or whatever. That hits at home real close to home.
Yeah,
anyway,
we all feel that. We know what that's like. And DR, like anything, incident response DR should be a real exercise. It should be one of those things where your executives should get a call at 2 a.m. Something's down. What do you do?
Right.
And I hate to make it that proactive, but if you don't have a process where those that are critical to the environment, we know the hands-on people, we know the techs, they deal with problems every day. They're going to just follow their process. They're going to work through it, but it's all the other people. What is the legal team? Does the legal team have a way of talking? How about your press and your marketing teams? How do we talk to the press? What do we talk about? When everyone's panicking and you have like 14 executives calling you saying, "What's our message?" What is the message? And creating it on the fly is not going to be a good incident response. You've got to prepare in advance.
Yeah, that's a good point too from a comms perspective. I didn't even really think about that, but like, yeah, if something, if we're running something, and it goes down, and we're like a large enterprise, so we potentially interface with millions of people all the time. Yeah. Do you have somebody in marketing or legal or comms that can craft a message that won't get you sued or something, or won't get can help you communicate without getting attacked even further, so to speak? I guess that's always that's a good point to have for sure.
Yeah, and a tabletop exercise doesn't have that sense of urgency. You almost need to have a mock real situation. Otherwise, but we're also busy. How do we, I don't know about you, but my calendar looks like a solid blue blur across the calendar. I don't have any free spots. How do we find the time to do a real testing, real incident response, and then lessons learned? How do we learn from that so we're not learning in real time?
Right. And then maybe that goes to more of this whole concept of a truly active infrastructure, maybe taking things down, really getting to maybe a more modern application architecture where you could potentially lose a data center or site, and things would still work. So maybe you say, all right, we're going to simulate data center A is going offline, so you take shut it off at the global load balancer, and then divert traffic to data center B and C type of thing.
Well, that's kind of where chaos engineering came from.
Yeah.
Netflix for all the stuff that they did for that world, but it would be great to have But then again, there's the opposite side, where DR could, just testing all these things we're talking about could actually impact production. Do we want to turn off the global load balancer? So we are we ready? Is the infrastructure, is the application, is the business ready for that really to happen? And if we can't do a DR test, this is my opinion, if we can't do a DR test where you turn off that global load balancer and the business doesn't keep working, then that's a good indication that we need to work on something.
Right. If you're not ready to pull the plug, then if you know everything's going to break before you pull the plug, then you definitely need to get ready to even test pulling the plug, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, the two, like, I guess, do you find it common that you might have like this tiering of apps, right? You have like the business critical A, B, C, D, and then based on those tiering, that determines the availability or the SLA, SLO of the application within the organization type of thing.
Definitely, and I think that it changes by industry and by company. That like picture like an intelligence agency. Their tier 1 app might be constrained by what their missions are, what their things are, versus a banking environment where if ATM banking goes offline, it's not as critical as online banking, or the ability for tellers to function. Because there are regulations on banks can only, if you can't service your customers for a certain amount of time, it actually turns into official actions. So the difference changes based upon the business need, and that's where it's critical that security teams and operations teams, we have to have knowledge of what's critical for the business. It's not just an IT or a security black hat, white hat type of conversation. It really is, what is that critical function of the business, and how do we make sure that that business has what it needs to continue functioning?
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, I guess I got a lot of flashbacks now of like DR testing and like writing run books and like, this is actually like, why are we even doing this? Because there's no way this would actually work type of thing, or like, getting to the if you were, I know we have some other products within the maybe the core VCF space of like these live disaster recovery where you can kind of like boot up all your VMs somewhere else temporarily, or like even, I should know the names of these things, but it's been a while. So I'm kind of drawing a blank there, but like, like SRM or
even with all that stuff though, you're talking about, if you're talking about 10,000 servers or even worse, data systems with petabytes of data.
Yeah.
You can't just spin it up. It's just getting that, if you had 1,000 servers and each one was a terabyte of disk, and you want to turn that on a server, and you go, oh, I got capacity over in California. I'm in the East Coast. I have to transmit all that data to California. How long would it take to transmit a petabyte of data to California?
A while, depending, a while to forever.
It's honestly faster to take the hard drive and get on an airplane and fly there.
Right.
Because I've seen that happen. I've actually seen DR situations where they just grabbed a hard drive from the data center, hopped on a plane, flew out to the other data center, and plugged it in. It was just faster to do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially too, if you might be trying to push data to a remote site over like a T1 times thousands.
Or a fraction of T1 because you're on like a POS network. Say you're a retailer and you've got 1,000 locations. You have fractional T1s, all those locations. You can't do that.
Yeah, you're not shoving you'll be lucky even push a gig out there, let alone any large data.
You think about it, we talk about edge a lot in a lot of our conversations, and there aren't many Cloud Foundry edges because it is a bigger system. But in Kubernetes, and I think most of those conversations they have registries local because you can't expect to download the images for those pods over that T1 or T1. You have to slowly stage it into the registry, and then when it's ready, you can use it. So it's and actually going back, I think you had Mark Fines on here like last week.
Yeah, we're talking a little bit about the future unknown hidden superpowers. I think that's what we called it. Yeah, and like even some of the new SRT or small runtime kind of functionality, and even what we was doing with his the droplet work.
I've seen the droplet part specifically. The idea that, oh my God, we need to get this up and running. Let's grab that droplet and just transmit that over. And then it's even more. It's more optimized too. I think he was showing the memory usage, and those things were even better. So
going from like gigs to megs in terms of memory, which is that's still I still need to process that a little bit of. It's like look, I scaled up like 30 instances, and it's still less than what one instance would have been, type of thing. So it's
that's actually where I'm kind of curious where Cloud Foundry might go. If we think about the larger customers using Cloud Foundry, they don't have just one foundation. They'll have dozens, not hundreds of them. And if you have code you're pushing, if you do a CF push to 100 places, if you think of like Salsa and the whole provenance and that sort of conversation, well, it's different. It's same build service, but it's you have to wait for them all to build. So if I had a build server, I'm really curious where the future of build packs and the build process within Cloud Foundry, where all that's going. I think that'll help with the whole DR, the whole scalability, the whole idea of this process will fit into that. I'm super excited about the future of this. The investments going into Cloud Foundry, the investments going to making these better, multi-foundation stories, the story of the way you consume this at large enterprises. And when we say large enterprises, we're talking hundreds of thousands of containers running. We're talking like the biggest environments that are 10 plus years old. These are mature, solid environments. Right. How can we make that better? I'm super excited.
Well, even too, like it just memory savings alone, because like when I ran when I was a operator or platform engineer, what do you want to say?
Back in my day.
Back in my day, 3-4 years ago. We would measure like memory allocation in terabytes of RAM for like foundations, and it's like, man, if you could, RAM still isn't super cheap, right? So scaling back RAM and freeing up DRAM and host systems across the board would just make a lot of people happy in terms of just general cost savings. So that's good. And then, I would love to see how that, like hear a story of like, we had, this app ran, 10,000 instances, but then we scaled it down. We saved, however many, if we could scale that out to like that 90% memory saving across, like a large scale app, that would be a really cool story.
Especially in public cloud, where it's extremely expensive, or if you're on-prem with vSphere, where you have limited amount of memory. The idea that you could take an environment that you're at capacity, redo it, and all of a sudden you have like even 50% more memory would be huge.
Yeah, because I mean, even if you have the funding to buy more gear, it still takes a while to get rack and stack it, and you just don't, unless you just have a an emergency pile of servers ready to go, right?
Which some companies do. They actually
mm-hmm.
have, either cold or warm spares just sitting in a data center, and they have to rebuild those every 10, 5 or so years. You have to go and rebuild out new hardware. And
yeah, I guess, depending on your business classification and how you rate your applications, you may have the justification to have spare capacity or excess capacity to scale up, for sure. So yeah, I think there's been a lot to unpack here, and I just feel back of like a lot of things that I forgot about were brought back out of my cold storage today. So I appreciate the memory, the walk down memory lane of good and maybe not so great memories. But yeah, so a very interesting conversation. We're coming up on 51 minutes here. So any other topics or any kind of last closing thoughts that you want to kind of share with the community? I'll try to give you a little bit time back in your calendar, since I know you're a very busy person. So
I wish I had a couple of thoughts besides just, if you have questions on this, reach out. We talk to a lot of customers on this every day. If you have concerns, if you have needs, if you are a Crowdstrike customer and you are a Cloud Foundry customer, again, reach out. I'm happy to tell you where we're at with that process. I've not reached out to them in a few weeks just because they've been busy. I don't want to, I don't want to cause any more angst on the teams that's already got enough pressure on them. But I would expect that we will see some Crowdstrike stuff in the Cloud Foundry world, hopefully before the quarter's over. I don't want to guarantee on times, but again, that it'll come when it comes. But if anyone has questions or concerns or are curious about this idea that Nick and I were talking about, the idea of the big A app of the environment. How do you look at multi-foundation views? How do you actually look at this DR and staging things? And what can Cloud Foundry do to prevent or mitigate these sort of things in the future? Let's talk about it. I'm happy to have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes. I welcome any of these conversations. It's great to have you on. I'm thrilled that we can add this episode to the which will be soon to be renamed into the DMZ playlist on our YouTube channel. So if you're out there listening, thank you. A friendly reminder to like and subscribe to our content. That really helps out. So we're continuing to grow. We do publish the podcast version as well. So if you like to get caught up on things via audio format, that's out there too. So thanks again for everyone listening. And I guess next week we have our special guest next week. We're going to bring Jacob Newton on, and we're going to be deep diving into some of the new features within Tanzu platform, specifically some of these new multi-foundation views and things that we were kind of talking about. So we might even be able to show that live of how we're bringing out some additional observability and kind of maybe logging and things within Tanzu platform.
Yeah, Nick, I was looking at it just this morning. It's actually real. So there's some things that I didn't expect. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So yeah, I'll watch next week. So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I was talking to Jacob earlier. It was either like last week or I don't know, sometime. And I was like, what even, like that's there? I was like, whoa. It's like, I didn't see that on any kind of roadmap anywhere, but hold the door. So I'm actually very excited about it. And I've been wiring up some of my foundations to our hub, or I guess wherever I've been allocated space within Tanzu platform to wire things up. I can't, I guess the org is the proper terminology in this case. But yeah, I hopefully we'll have some good demos here. I might even make a new demo video just on this type of functionality because I think it's pretty cool. And you'll definitely see more of this at Explore. So, another friendly reminder: if you're going to VMware Explore, we got a lot of great sessions. I will put that in the show notes as well. But check out we have a lot of Cloud Foundry based sessions out there. Nikki and I got a lot of various topics. I got a lot of updates around Gen AI, but we also have what's new within Tanzu platform for Cloud Foundry. So definitely check that episode out if you're a frequent listener. If you're going there, I think you'll like what you see there. So that being said, we should probably wrap up. So you can get on to your next meeting and things.
So we can talk forever. So
yeah, exactly. All right, so we'll end it here with our classic CF bye, and then we'll see you next week. All right. See you. Bye.